Welcome back, Weirdos and Weeboos, to the channel of Butch and Doge, where today I'm going to be covering how you can get all these 4 Skylanders games working nice and smoothly on RPCS3. And you might notice that in the title, we've got in big bold letters there, timestamps. This video is long, but don't worry, you probably only need like 2 minutes of this video to figure out your problem, most likely. Only problem is, there's a lot of different problems you could have. And I don't know exactly which one you have, you the viewer. You personally. So essentially, if you see a timestamp down there that seems like it's going to take you to a fix for your issue, and the rest of it doesn't seem very relevant, then go ahead and skip most of this video. But, just one thing, if you watch this video, and you still have a problem, and you want to ask me questions, that's fine, but please listen to this bit at the start before you ask anything. First and foremost, I want to make one thing very clear about this video. I am not giving out the ROMs to the games. I am not allowed to do that, and even if I was, my connection is too garbage for that. This video is intended to help people who already have the games on their RPCS3, but the games aren't working properly. Which brings me to my second point. For 2, your RPCS3 might not be working with any games right now if you haven't set it up properly. You do need to add some files to it that don't necessarily come with it out of the box to get it working in the first place. I'm not going to cover that in this video because there are plenty of tutorials out there that cover this already, and also I don't really have anything to say that those tutorials don't already say, so I probably wouldn't be adding much of value. You'd probably be better off following the tutorials of someone who knows a lot more about what they're doing, specifically with setting up this emulator. Third, I want to mention that this emulator is relatively CPU hungry, so if you're playing on a lower end machine, there's a decent chance that you're going to run into issues even if you are doing everything right, just because maybe your machine is going to struggle to handle it. Which brings me on to point 4. Some people were mentioning this in the comments of my first video, and I feel like it's fair that I should probably mention it at the start of this video. If you really care about performance when it comes to emulating these games, then technically this isn't the best emulator for it. Especially when it comes to games like Swap Force and Trap Team, you'd be better off with the Wii U emulator Cemu. However, as most of you probably already know if you're at the point where you're watching this video, there is a good reason to use this emulator over Cemu. While this emulator definitely doesn't run as smoothly, it of course has the emulated Skylanders portal. Cemu doesn't. This is obviously why I personally am using RPCS3 instead of Cemu. You see, if you want to play these games on Cemu, then you need to still have your physical portal. Your portal has to be one that you can plug into your PC and that will work with your PC. It also has to be one that's compatible with the Wii versions of the games, because the Xbox plug-in portals aren't, but I believe the PS3 ones are. And as well as that, if you are going to use a physical plug-in portal, then you also have to go through some extra setup to do with a program called Dig. There are other videos out there covering that. If you do want to, now you know that, try this on Cemu instead of RPCS3. However, of course, I'm doing this on RPCS3 because while I do have portals, every portal I have is one that I can't use on emulator, just my luck. I do have one portal for a Wii version of the games, but that's Spyro's Adventure, where I got a battery-powered portal that I can't plug into my PC. Every other Skylanders game I got the Xbox version of, which isn't compatible with the PS3 or Wii versions. Of course though, now with the emulator portal, I can just select whichever Skylander I want, instead of having to have the physical figures out there on the table in front of me. This also brings me to my last point, which is just before you ask questions, quickly just double check and skim the video to check that I didn't already say it. I know this might sound condescending, but there are a lot of people who are asking me questions about things I already explained in the first video, but they just forgot or skipped over it. Again, if you do by accident forget something and you do ask me something I already covered in this video, I'm not going to get pissed at you or anything. It's just, if you can help it, try not to do that, because I get a lot of the same questions. One last thing I just have to edit in post is also I forgot to mention, could you please try to be specific if you want to ask me for help as well? Because it's not very helpful when people are coming to me with issues, but then their description of the issue is, the game does not work. Knowing stuff like, oh, how doesn't it work? Is it that you get a black screen when this happens? Is it that the game crashes when this happens? Is very important. And as well as that, remember that I cover 4 games in this video, so try not to just say the game, because then I don't know which of the 4 games you're talking about, and my answer's different depending on which game you're saying. Anyway, thank you for hearing all that out. We're now finally going to get into how to actually set up each of these games. However, there are a couple things that apply to every single one of them that I want to cover straight away. So, first things first, I'm going to go to Giants as an example. For each of these games, you should be able to right-click them and go on to Change Custom Configuration to change the settings for that game specifically. You are able to change your settings from here, but this will change your settings for all games on the emulator, and you will need different settings for each game, so I don't recommend going to your settings from here. I recommend you go to the game you actually want to change the settings of, right-click, and go Change Custom Configuration. From there, you get a whole bunch of tabs: CPU, GPU, Audio, Input-Output, System, Network, Advanced, Emulator, and you won't have this tab yet, but there's also a Debug tab. You're gonna need this for some of the games later, but don't worry, I'll explain why it's not on your screen. First things first, there will be this thing here called Renderer. Now there's two ways I could cover this, the long version or the short version. I think I'm gonna give the short version first, but then also give you the long version and just recommend you skip it if you don't need the long version. Short version is basically just click this drop down and select Vulkan every single time. It should already be selected, but if it isn't, you know, make sure that this is on Vulkan before you play any of these games. I believe if it's on disable video output, it'll just be a black screen. And if it's on OpenGL, it might work, but you're likely to have a lot of graphical issues and perhaps even performance issues. That's the short version. However, if you click this drop down and you do not see Vulkan as an option here, then I might need to tell you the long version. So essentially, these renderers are things called graphics APIs. As you can imagine, there are a lot of games out there that need to draw 2D or 3D things to the screen. Basically, every game in existence needs to draw things to the screen. When you really get down to it, it's actually a lot of work getting the PC to a point at which it's actually drawing stuff to the screen and like getting messages from the operating system to manage the game. And obviously it'd be pointless to do this over every single time you made a new game, because practically every game in existence is going to need to do this stuff. So this is essentially what graphics APIs are for. You can think of it basically like just a bunch of code that is reusable for just about every game in existence that is used to get the game to draw stuff onto your screen, and also used to help the game communicate with your graphics card to tell it how to draw things. You'll see that two of these options here, OpenGL and Vulkan, are some of the bigger graphics APIs out there. There's also ones like DirectX. And typically you don't have to install these onto your PC. Typically when you get your PC, it's set to default to update your drivers for all your hardware. Now I said some computery words there, so let me explain very clearly. You probably heard the term software and hardware, but just to make sure you know the difference. Hardware is like a physical part in your computer, like the graphics card or the keyboard or whatever. Software is just programs. They don't physically exist, they're just on the computer. Drivers are essentially pieces of software that you attach to hardware for your computer, and typically they're used to either resolve issues that people discover with hardware after it's already been released, and you know, it's a lot easier to, instead of completely removing this part from your computer and getting a new one, instead to just add a bit of software that tells the hardware to do something different to fix the problem. Or with graphics cards, often these graphics APIs will be installed onto your computer automatically if your graphics card can handle them, because they'll be considered a driver for the graphics card. And unless you set your Windows to do otherwise, I'm pretty sure just about anyone should have their drivers updating automatically. Unless they specifically say to Windows, hey, I don't want these things updated automatically. But the point is this, if you don't see Vulkan on here, it means that your graphics card didn't come with it. I will say right off the bat, chances are if you don't see Vulkan as an option, you're either playing on a very old PC or you're playing on a laptop. Which means I'd say that I'm skeptical that you could get this to run smoothly on your machine. It is possible to get it to show up. However, I do want to say before you go down this rabbit hole that if you aren't seeing Vulkan as an option, it is likely because your graphics card is not very powerful at all and would struggle to run this game. So you might be putting in a lot of work for what won't even be very rewarding in the first place. However, if you're adamant that your machine should be strong enough to run these games and Vulkan just isn't showing up, then I'm going to link another video in the description that goes through how you can get Vulkan to show up if it's not showing up here. Anyway, that's the renderer. The other setting that you'll have to change for all four of these games is in the Advanced tab. Driver wake up delay. Now personally, I haven't noticed a difference when turning this up or down, but most of these games apparently do experience occasional practically random crashes if you do not have this to at least something higher than 0. You don't have to set it very high, and if you set it extremely high, you might start notice the game lagging more than it should need to. But setting it to 200 or 400 should do the trick. Those are the two things that you need to keep in mind for all 4 of these games. And in fact, good news, you've already set up Skylanders Giants. Yeah, that's why I started with Giants, because it's the easiest to set up. All you have to do is make sure your render is Vulkan, and make sure that the driver wake-up delay is set to something at least a little higher than 0, and you can just play it. I get to showing how to use the emulated portal later in this video. With that out of the way, let's move on to Swap Force. Now actually, with the same tweaks as with Giants, Swap Force is completely playable. However, the longer you play it, you'll start to notice it isn't as stable as Giants was. As you can see, in my 55 hours practically of playing Giants, I have not had it crash once. However, when I was playing Swap Force, I did have it crash quite a lot. Now thankfully these crashes weren't frequent enough that I couldn't play the game. In fact, I actually beat the entire game before I even figured out what was causing these crashes. I initially just kind of assumed, well, Swap Force is a big graphical upgrade from the previous 2 games, so maybe it's just my PC simply struggling to run it. Which is kind of true, I do start experiencing a lot more frame drops with Swap Force, but that wasn't what was causing the crashes. Unfortunately, this is where the Debug tab comes in. Now the fix here is really simple. All it is this PPU thread count thing is usually set to 2. You just need to set it to 4 and it will work. And since I have made this change, Swap Force hasn't crashed once for me. Now that is great news, but you can't see that debug tab, and that's a problem. So here's how you get the debug tab to show up. First of all, you want to go to the folder where you installed this emulator, and one of the folders will be called GUI configs. Inside GUI configs, you're going to have this current settings.ini folder, or INI. You want to right click that and open it with Notepad. It's going to have a whole bunch of information in it, but you just need to scroll to the bottom, and then there should be this little bit where it says meta. Top thing under the meta title should be show debug tab, and when you see this, it's going to say equals false. All you have to do is delete the part where it says false and type in true. Make sure that there's no spaces and no capitals, and then make sure that you press save before you close this. I would also recommend doing this while the emulator is closed and then opening the emulator. I did have some issues while doing this, where for some reason at first it kept setting itself back to false after I'd already set it to true, even though I'd saved my changes. And I must admit, I'm not sure why this happened, but my best guess is that I was having issues because the emulator was still open, or maybe running in the background. Either way, all I had to do was just keep trying a few more times and eventually it worked. So if you do have that issue, all I can say is just do it a couple more times and it'll work. So yeah, once you've done that, you should be able to just go to the debug tab, PPU thread count, set it to 4, and apply your changes. But for a few of you, you were still experiencing one other issue. It was one that I came up multiple times when people were asking me questions, and for the longest time, I didn't know how to fix it. And now I feel like a real idiot because I never actually thought to look at the, RPCS3 wiki. And it turns out that this is the only known documented issue to do with Swap Force. Not even the PPU Threads thing is documented on there, but this is, so I could have just looked it up. Anyway, this issue is that some people will have the game work, however, everything appears red. Just the only color on the screen is red. The fix for this? Just go to the GPU area in Advanced, and the second from the bottom is this tick box, disable native float 16 support. Now you'll see I don't have this ticked, but that's just because I didn't have this issue in the first place. This issue is tied to your graphics card, so my graphics card doesn't have this issue, so there's no need for me to tick this tick box. However, if RPCS3's wiki is to be trusted, then if you are having this issue, you just have to tick this. Unfortunately, of course, I can't test this myself because I don't have a graphics card that has this issue. Essentially what I think is going on here is that you might notice this says float 16. A float is basically a decimal number inside a computer, and typically we use 32 bits of memory to represent a single decimal point number. However, you can use less if you need to cram it into a smaller amount of space. That's obviously why this says float 16. It's a 16-bit float. So basically, what I think is happening is that somehow some graphics cards are expecting 32-bit floats when the game is sending 16-bit floats, which means that only the first half of all the color information in the game gets filled out. Typically that's obviously RGB values, red, green, blue, So that means that it's getting red color information and maybe a little bit of green, but then it's getting no blue information. So that's likely why the game is appearing red if you don't have this ticked. And hopefully ticking this will make it so it realizes what the size of the decimals being sent are. These two things will make Swap Force fully playable, bar one little issue. You will not be able to play the adventure pack levels right out the gate before you do one more thing. However, this thing is related to the emulator portal, so it's something that I'm going to show later in the video. Again, go find the timestamp if you want. Funnily enough, I went into this expecting the first game, Spyro's Adventure, to be the easiest to set up, but honestly it was the hardest. Luckily, one of the things was something we've already covered, that being the Debug Tab. The only reason I actually knew to set this PPU thread count thing to 4 for Swap Force is because doing it for Spyro's Adventure prevented crashes. It's especially important with Spyro's Adventure. With Swap Force, if you have this set to 2, the game's still fully playable, it'll just crash every now and then. With Spyro's Adventure, you won't be able to go 2 minutes without the game crashing if you don't have this set to 4. The other thing you need to do is, apparently this game tries to connect to the servers of some of the developers when you run it, which means that if you don't have your network status set to connected, you run into a good amount of lag. So you want to set that to connected. I don't know if your PSN status has to be simulated, I kind of just set it to that while fiddling around, and I don't think it made a difference. However, that's all you should have to do. Now, you might notice that I said that Spyro's Adventure is the hardest to set up, and yet I haven't talked about Trap Team yet. The reason for that is, the setup for Trap Team isn't too bad. It's basically the same as Swap Force. Just set that wake up delay to 200 milliseconds or 400, and set that PPU thread count to 4. And the game's set up. You don't even have to do the weird advanced disable native float 16 thing for this one, as far as I'm aware.
Stick to it.
What? Man, come on, now get.
But the reason I put it last is because Trap Team is the least stable of these games that I've played so far. It's the only one that I still have crash sometimes, and I don't have any solution for those crashes. I don't know for sure, but I think these crashes might be to do with the Traptanium portal. See, of course, the portal for Trap Team is a little different from the previous ones. The Trap Team portal both had a slot for traps, which, although you are able to use traps with the emulator portal, they don't have a dedicated trap slot, you just load them like a normal Skylander. And as well as that, with a physical portal, there's the speaker, which the villains that you trap sometimes speak through. However, when you play this game on RPCS3, you will hear nothing when the villains are trying to speak to you through the portal. Now, this on its own would be a small issue, but I also think this sometimes crashes the game. I haven't had enough crashes with Trap Team to be certain, but I believe every time it's crashed so far is a moment where someone would have been talking through the portal. The number one place the game seems to crash the most for me is this cutscene on the final level of the game. Essentially, for me, every single time I get to this point, it's a coin flip 50-50 of whether the game crashes or lets me through. And I must admit, I have no idea why this is, unless again it's to do with the speaker. All that aside though, while the game does have crashes and I don't know how to fix them, it is still very much playable. I have beaten the entire game, and it doesn't even crash as much as Swap Force did when I beat it before I knew how to fix the crashes. I've only had about like 3 or 4 so far with Trap Team. However, it does have other big issues with the emulated portal, which I'll get to later. In short, you will be able to use villains to open villain chests and do villain quests, but due to issues with the portal, you won't really be able to play as the villains you have trapped. At least not most of the time. With all that said, let's get into using the portal in these games. Let's start with Spyro's Adventure. So as you can see, we don't have any Skylanders in the portal yet, but all we have to do is go to the Skylanders manager in, well, Manage, and select our Skylander. Now for me, I've already made all the Skylanders, so I just have to click Load, and I decided to put them inside a folder I created called Skylanders inside the emulator. This won't be here already when you get your emulator, but you can create your own Skylanders file like I have. And then I've got them all here. So I can just load the most underrated Skylander of all time, Warnado, and start playing. Now, for you though, you obviously don't have Skylanders yet, so you have to, well, create them. Can you guess how you do that? Yeah, you simply click this create button, and I'm not actually going to do it because, you know, I've already created every copy of everyone that I'm going to need for now. But you'll see a drop-down menu with a whole bunch of Skylanders in it, and you simply select the Skylander you want and click create. You do not have to worry about these ID or variant things. At least usually. We'll get back to that later when it does become relevant. I will also warn that this list is semi-ordered, but it could definitely be ordered better. You do have all the first game Skylanders all at the top, all ordered with them elements, and all of them have all their different versions like bundled together. So you got Eruptor, then Light Core Eruptor, then Series 2 Eruptor, then Lava Boss Eruptor, then Volcanic Eruptor, and then Eon's Elite Eruptor, before it goes on to the next character. Even though some of these aren't, well, I say some of these, all of these aren't from the first game except the original Eruptor. This is all pretty well organized. At first, it goes into the second game's Giants. You got all the Giants Skylanders, and then things start getting a bit weird. After all the Giant Skylanders are the magic items from the first game, but not the adventure packs. Then there's all the traps for Trap Team, which go on for quite a while. There's like 60 of them or something. Then there's the adventure packs for the first game, followed by the Volcanic Vault, which is a magic item which just unlocks a battle arena in the first game, followed by the adventure packs for Trap Team. Then you got the legendary versions of the first game Skylanders. Then you got the Trap Team Skylanders, including the mini Skylanders. Then you start getting into the, I think these are, I didn't play Supercharged and Imaginators yet, but I think these are the Imaginators ones that we're getting into here. And then after the Imaginators ones, then we have the Swap Force ones, including the bottom and top halves of each of the swappers, and then after that, all the normal Skylanders in Swap Force. After all the normal Skylanders, you have the Swap Force magic items, then you have the Superchargers, and then for some reason over here are the adventure packs for Swap Force. They're really far down, as well as Fiery Forge and Archean Crossbow. Anyway, at the bottom you got these trophies. So yeah, the list could be ordered better, but it is somewhat ordered. So you would just select one, click create, and then save it somewhere as literally a file on your computer, a .sky file. And then later, when you click load, it would show up in that folder.
I like turtles.
Me too, Quigley. Me too. The Giants and Skylanders Giants work exactly the same. You literally just put them on the portal, and they work.
I've got my eye on you.
Yeah. I should probably take this opportunity to quickly show off using magic items too, or adventure packs, like if I put Dragon's Peak on here. It'll come up. Of course, I already have it unlocked because I've already placed it on the portal. You can see... yeah, I've already got it there. But I can also still just use normal magic items like Hidden Treasure. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking that maybe Swap Force would have quite a bit of problems with the swappers. But luckily, they're actually really simple. So one thing I just want to make very clear right off the bat is that which slot, which part goes in, does not matter. I can put a bottom part in the top slot, and I don't know, just Doomstone's bottom part, and then put a top half in slot 3 and it'll still work. As long as I put them in one after another. It doesn't matter.
Welcome back to Woodboro, hero of Cloudbreak Islands.
However, this is where we get into quite a big problem. You see, if you were to decide to create the Tower of Time and Shipwreck Islands and load them onto your portal, you'll see that the figures do appear on the screen, and they do their effect where like they do the kind of field clear effect, but they aren't added to your collection. This isn't just something that makes it harder to get the, you know, collection stars done because, oh, it doesn't count as being added to your collection, these Skylanders. It also makes it so you don't unlock their corresponding levels. Without doing some extra stuff that makes it appear in your collection like it has for me, you won't be able to play the Tower of Time levels and the Shipwreck Island level. In fact, this is an issue for basically every non-normal Skylander figure in Swap Force. Almost everything you can see here I have actually put on the portal. I just haven't done the extra steps to get them to actually register in my collection. So what do? Well, if I load the version of the Tower of Time that works for me now, I'll have to admit, I did not figure this out on my own. Someone already had a working version that they downloaded from someone else, and I took a look at it. Now, they didn't have it saved as a .sky file. They had it saved as a .dump file, which means I have to set it to this so that it'll show up. If I scroll down until I get to Tower of Time, there it is. When I load it, you'll see it doesn't actually say Tower of Time. It says unknown ID 3301 variant 8192. So of course, unfortunately I've already unlocked the level, so it's hard for me to test this now. But as far as I understand, and I have had someone else in my Discord server try this and they said it worked, essentially, I'm not even sure if you even need to make it a dump file, but I guess you can try turning it into a dump file if it doesn't work. I think all you have to do is, when you create a Tower of Time, a brand new Tower of Time, instead of going to this drop-down menu, finding the Tower of Time in here, selecting it and all that, you just type in ID 3301, which is the... Oh, that's 9101, which is the ID of Tower of Time, followed by that variant number, which I already forgot. Yeah, 8192. So I'm pretty sure I can just type in here 3301 8192. Create. And you'll see it's read as Tower of Time. For Shipwreck Islands, it's the exact same, only you put in the ID of Shipwreck Islands instead of the ID of Tower of Time. So you put in ID as 3300 instead of 3301, and you still put in the var thing as 8192. Now, I've got to admit, I haven't actually tested this yet. Let me see if I am able to actually get some of these magic items into my collection this way, or if it doesn't accept it. So we have Platinum Sheep, ID 3202. Let's try putting in the variant as 8192. Well, it recognized it. It turned me into a sheep. Very nice. And yeah, sure enough, Platinum Sheep is now in my collection. So yeah, it appears like for all these magic items, if you want them to be recognized, you just have to put in the variant as 8192. You probably don't even need them to be dump files then, because this is still a Skylander file. Of course though, Trap Team is where we really start having problems. Now, as you can see, swappers still work, same as normal. And if I want to play as a Trap Master, there's nothing special I have to do. I just literally go to the load and, yeah, pick a Trap Master. Same as the Giants.
Gusts and glory.
The problem comes in when I want to play as a villain that I've trapped. Now, I'm not sure if it'll do the thing. It does the thing almost every time, but of course just my luck. When I tried recording this before, the one time it didn't do the thing is the one time I'm trying to record the thing happening. But if you go to load, I'm going to load one of my traps. Let's load Bad Juju. Okay. It looks like it's working as intended. I'll get to play as Bad Juju for a moment. However, this is... If it's going to do the thing, this is not going to last. And it's not going to do the thing. Very interesting. So now let me load into a level and see if that changes. Oh. Okay. Oh, no, there we go.
Gusts and glory. Bad juju.
So that's what happens, it just resets everything on the portal. It does this for every single villain in the game. And it won't stop doing it until you remove the villain from the portal. As well as that, you can very easily get stuck in a loop where essentially it thinks you've tried to remove a Skylander at a point where you're not allowed to remove them from the portal, and so it kicks you out of the game until you add them back to the portal. But they are on the portal, it's just not recognizing it. At which point you have to take everything off the portal and then put it back on the portal in the same order you put it on. So you still have to make sure that you put whatever you put on first, and whatever you put on second for it to work. As well as that, this is the one instance I've found in which the slots that you put them in actually matter. If you do get stuck in a situation where it won't let you back into the game until you return the Skylanders to the portal when they are already on the portal, then you not only have to clear everything on the portal, but when you put things back, put them back in different slots. If you try to put things back in the same slot, it won't check that slot and realize that anything has changed. This is about as frustrating as it sounds. And this is why I don't recommend going into this even trying to play villains in Trap Team. That being said, as you can see, you can put them in the portal, and you can play as them periodically, which means that you can play as them long enough to open a villain chest, and it also means that you can play as them long enough to accept a villain quest. And once you're in that villain quest, it can't kick the villain off the portal until you're done with it, which means you don't have to worry about this happening in the middle of a villain quest. So you can still very much 100% the game, you just won't really be able to play as villains in normal gameplay. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about what you can do to make these games run a little bit faster if they're running a bit slow for you. Although I will say, chances are that everything is already set to the fastest settings, at least everything that's important, so I'm not going to promise that you can make a massive difference with this. But if you're really looking to eke out every last little bit of slightly better performance, well then first of all, you want to have your PPU decoder on Recompiler. It will probably be there anyway, but this is a lot faster than the interpreter options. SPU decoder, bottom option, is the fastest again. This option is also pretty fast, and you don't have to wait as long for the game to boot up with this option. However, this option isn't as fast as the bottom option. Do not use the interpreter options if you're looking for speed. For the shader mode, you want to have it set to one of the asynchronous options. Async multi-threaded is the fastest one, however you might experience graphics pop-in with this, so if you don't want graphics pop-in, use with shader interpreter. Shaders are needed to render things, and if a shader isn't ready yet, and you have it on multi-threaded, then it simply won't render the thing that needs the shader, and then it'll just pop into existence once it is ready. Whereas with this option, it will try and figure out how to draw it even if the shader isn't quite ready. But that does mean that this is not quite as fast as multi-threaded. As far as I know, those are the only options which would have a significant effect, but if you're really looking to eke out every last bit of good performance, then there are a few other settings you can mess with. You can set the accuracy of SPU X floats to relaxed. You can set the SPU block size to giga. You can set the Z-call accuracy to relaxed. You can try setting the anisotropic filter to the minimum option of 2 times, and you can try disabling anti-aliasing. Generally, I would expect that if you're playing Spyro's Adventure or Giants on a decent PC, as long as you set them up correctly, they should run nice and smoothly. However, even if you have a decent PC, playing Swap Force or Trap Team, you're probably going to experience some frame drops. Nothing horrible or anything, I've never seen it drop below 20 FPS. But obviously 20 isn't a very high FPS. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hopefully this video answered your questions and you can now enjoy playing these games. I am probably going to cover superchargers and imaginators in future if they do need any kind of special settings to be set to get them to work. However, as you can see, I've not got round to them yet. And if you're still stuck, again, feel free to join the Discord server or even DM me directly as long as you don't spam me. Just remember the things that I listed at the start that I want you to do before you ask me any questions. With all that said, good luck 100%ing all these games on Nightmare mode. You are going to do that, right?